Welcome to this edition of On Tap, presented by FCSI the Americas. I'm Wade Kaler, Executive Director. On Tap this week, I get to welcome one of the most interesting members of FCSI. His backstory and beginning here in the USA are amazing, and he's become one of the go-to consultants for many top chefs. He's also one of the best-dressed consultants every time I see him. Please welcome the founding principal of YuiDesign, Mr. Jimi Yui. Hi, Jimmy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Wade.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to talking to you for a long time. We've known each other for a long time. And like I said, you are one of the best dressed people I ever see when we're at events. So
not today, though, huh?
No, it's okay.
I'm dressed for COVID today.
That's right. Well, we all dress like that for COVID, even myself in a polo. So we're all good for today.
Well, the question is, what are you wearing? Do you have shorts on or do you have pants on?
Well, a little known secret about Wade is he wears shorts all year round. I live in Illinois where it gets cold, and unless the temperature is below zero, I'm wearing shorts. It's something that I'm guilty of. It goes back to my college days. I won't get into that backstory, but over a beer sometime I'll tell you those days. But definitely goes back a long time for me. But with the whole purpose of this show is to kind of get to know our members a little bit better and let the audience kind of get to know who you are. So to start with, the easy question is, tell me a little bit about your background. I mean, how did you get started in the food service industry, and what brought you to being a food service consultant?
Sure. I'm born in Japan, Japanese, Chinese immigrants to Japan. And I grew up in a restaurant. My parents owned a Chinese restaurant, a very high-end Chinese restaurant in Tokyo. So ever since I was able to see over a bar top, I was the bartender. So when I was literally in grade school, the bar top would be somewhere around here. But even if the bar top were here, I could reach over the bar top with drinks. And literally, I mixed drinks when I was in grade school where I could barely see over the bar top.
Wow.
And I did my homework at empty tables. My life was in the restaurant. I hopped table to table as the dining room got filled. That's how I did my homework. And as you probably know from most of us in this business, you grow up in a hospitality business like that, and it really sticks with you.
Yeah, I agree.
And unbeknownst to my parents, who were not intended to be restaurateurs, but immigrants to Japan who became restaurateurs, successful ones, but nonetheless, nothing they had intended to do.
Yeah.
They had never, ever wished for their children to become hospitality people. So like most immigrant children, I grew up with my parents wishing and hoping that I became a Japanese doctor. and I failed them in that regard. But I wound up, so as to not become a restaurateur and a cook, I wasn't going to become a doctor.
Yeah. So
I wound up going to architecture school.
Fair enough.
And I was going to school in the U.S. I was admitted to Cornell's architecture school, and I started my education in architecture for the simple reason that to a 17-year-old, I like to draw. I heard that architects draw and get paid, and that was good enough for me.
That was good enough for you.
That was about all I knew about architecture. But I knew that design and art and drawing and things like that were things that I was interested in, and something that I probably had some semblance of talent in.
Sure.
So I went to architecture school, and I was hell-bent on becoming an architect. But 3 years into my architecture school, the economy crashed in one of the worst ways in the 70s that we can remember.
Sure.
And my friends who were fifth-year students graduating were uniformly unemployed.
Okay.
So were engineers. Interest rate was high. Unemployment was really high. Nobody was borrowing money. Nobody was building anything. And architects and engineers were uniformly unemployable.
Sure.
Being a foreign student, My only status in the US was as a student. And if I didn't get employment in my field of study, I would have to leave the country.
Yeah.
So I did some deep thinking at the time. I couldn't afford to finish architecture school. I was in my fourth year at that point. I had 2 years left. If I finished and got a degree in architecture and wound up unemployed, I would have to leave the country. So I decided to go to the hotel school at Cornell.
Okay.
Where all my partying friends went. And all the kids that were in the hotel school would say to me, "Oh, Jimmy, you grew up in a restaurant. So if you wind up unemployed, don't worry. We'll hire you as a waiter in one of our restaurants." And I thought to myself, 5 years of architecture, countless all-nighters.
Yeah.
Why would I wind up becoming a waiter at your restaurant?
Yeah.
And they said, well, because we're going to have jobs and you're not. And I said, well, that's a fair point. So I did a little research, and it turned out that kids out of the hotel school at Cornell literally had 3 job offers each when they graduated.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, like, they were 100% employable. So I made this, to me, an incredibly pragmatic decision. I left architecture school and transferred to the hotel school, which is not something people do. By the time you're in fourth year of architecture school, you don't quit. You're kind of a lifer at that point. So it was a very not a decision that the school, the administration, certainly my parents, nobody liked the idea. They thought it was an utterly stupid idea, particularly for my parents, because going to the hotel school meant I was going to wind up in the hospitality business.
Sure. Not only not a doctor, not an architect, but back in hospitality.
Right. Back in hospitality. And my parents were going, you people actually go to college to go into hospitality so you can become a who does that, right?
Yeah.
But sure enough, 2 years later, I finished our hotel school, and one of the classes I happened not to cut one day was a seminar that introduced alumni. And lucky for me, I didn't cut that class, and the speaker was John Cena.
Very good.
John Cena is an alumni of Cornell, and he often supported the kids coming out of the school. And after the seminar, actually, John, at the end of his seminar, he ended by saying, if any of you are interested in not being a assistant manager in a hotel or a restaurant, being at the bottom of the heap, and want to do something technical, and if you can draw, you have some skills like that, come talk to me.
Perfect.
Though it was like an amazing moment for me. So I went to talk to him.
You don't get too many light bulb moments like that in life where something like that goes off.
Lucky wouldn't even begin to describe it for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I went to talk to John, and John says, so why do you think you can do this? I said, I know how to draw. You said drawing was what you needed. Sure. John says, why do you think you can draw? I said, well, I finished 3 solid years of architecture school. He goes, oh, you can really draw? And I said, yeah, I can really draw. And he says, okay. It was like a Friday afternoon seminar. He says, okay, I'm going to fly you to Washington, D.C. Monday morning. I want you in my office for an interview.
Really?
So I spent the weekend with my incomplete portfolio, because I had no reason to have a portfolio at that point.
Right.
But I took all my drawings and made a portfolio out of it, flew to DC, interviewed first with John, second with Bill Eaton. And at the end of the afternoon, they offered me a job, and that was the beginning of my consulting career. I had no idea.
It's amazing to me at all these interviews I've done, how many times the name John Cena pops up. And I knew John when I was first with FCSI. He was on the board, and so I got to know him very well too. It's just amazing how much Cena Little, the firm, plays in
Oh,
so much of the food service consultants industry.
there are many of
And
us.
I don't think a lot of the younger members realize how many people came from that. I mean, they were the go-to, and they still are, but they were the go-to place for a lot of people to get their start.
Oh, absolutely. And
So,
I think, certainly in those days, there weren't that many food service consultants around
right.
to begin with.
Well, they all
And
worked for City
John,
Little.
right. And, and a few years later, many of us became his competitors, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at the time, we were the go-to company,
Right.
without a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. So with YuiDesign, what do you mainly focus in on? What are the top 3 to 5 segments that you work in?
Well, so in all honesty, the reason I wound up leaving Cena was because my interest was really at the culinary end of the business.
Sure.
And as you can imagine, back in those days, food service consultants basically did B&I
Sure, of course.
kind of projects. That was the bread and butter of the business. So, I did countless executive dining facilities and staff cafeterias and, all those kinds of things. And we had great clients. But once in a while, we would get a restaurateur.
Yeah.
And those were the guys that really, really turned me on.
Yeah.
And it was a different kind of work, a different kind of a product that you were trying to produce.
Yeah.
And I realized working for John that that's what really interested me. And
Sure.
and because it interested me, those kinds of projects that came into the house, I would always land. John and Bill would always have me do those projects.
Sure.
And eventually it occurred to me that if I wanted to do those kinds of projects, I might just be better off going out on my own.
Yeah.
And that was really the impetus.
Yeah.
So from the very, very beginning, my pursuit in this business was working for culinary people and restaurateurs, hospitality-driven projects.
Yeah.
I like working for end users. I like having a purpose and a goal. Generics or things that don't have very specific narratives and goals don't interest me as much.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, right?
No, of course not. But you've got some pretty high profile clients you've worked with. So you can certainly say that you found your niche in that area from getting out of the B&I to the restaurant industry. So, if people aren't aware, you've worked with some major celebrity chefs like Mario Batali. You created Italy with him. You've done
I did.
Jose Andres and Nobu and Morimoto and the list goes on and on, Jimmy. It's really impressive, and I don't know if everybody realizes how many you've worked with, but can you tell us what it's like to work with somebody that's a higher profile celebrity chef versus the mom and pop shop that you help out? Is it different, or how does it work differently, or is an up and coming chef different than working with somebody like the PR that's going to be on Italy when it comes out? Obviously,
as far as my work is concerned, I think I think many of my colleagues would agree that working for culinarians, the really, really big time guys, and celebrity isn't really what concerns me.
right?
The thing about it is that the guys who get really, really famous and are known to be very good at what they do, it's because they're really good at what they do. And they have a right. And the residual is that some of them become public figures and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But for me, as a practice, what really makes a difference is the fact that those guys, whether it's the Thomas Kellers or the Jose Andres or Morimoto or any of those guys, they got there because they really do have a very strong narrative. They have a product that they want to sell. They have an idea that drives them.
Yeah.
And what I love about working for guys like them is that they are like race car drivers, and you're tuning their car so that they can do it really, really well.
Nice.
Right? This is not a blind exercise, right?
Yeah.
I often tell people that maybe what I do is more like what a tailor does,
Okay.
in that you're going to come to me and say, I want the perfect pink polka dot suit for this occasion. And my job is to understand what that means to you.
Yeah.
And my job is to make you the best pink polka dot suit that I can muster,
Yeah.
so that it fits you, so that it
Absolutely.
serves your purpose, right?
Yeah.
So I think so much of what I do is trying to listen and understand, be in their shoes, and try to really like get into their head about how they function, how they think.
Yeah.
That's really the beginning for me.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
that's what really that's what's interesting to me versus the younger chefs that I've inherited or have had the pleasure to serve. Many of them I wound up with them because they were cooking in kitchens that I had designed for their master.
Sure. Absolutely.
And that's kind of a cool thing because there's a point of reference.
Mm-hmm.
I've had chefs come to me and say, I worked at such and such a place and I liked this about that kitchen that you did. And my version is, and there's a starting point, there's a reference of, I mean, they might not have the kind of capital that their masters had,
Sure.
but functionally, aesthetically, product wise, their service wise,
Yeah.
what's really important to them. I mean, those are the ideas that you get to talk about, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So those guys they tend to have a very, very clear narrative too.
Nice.
And then from there from there, it becomes less clear.
Sure.
And I find those to be the harder ones when the client is less certain of their narrative, their product, the service that they are trying to provide and sell, right? If you're not clear on what it is that your story is and what's going to make you money, it's hard for me to give you the perfect suit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, speaking of suits, so we get to see you in a pink polka dot suit the next time that we're at an FCSI event? Okay, very good. Very good. So, living in Manhattan and Maryland, where you and your wife live, both of those areas have been pretty crushed by COVID.
It's been terrible.
What's it going to take, like New York City and Baltimore and those, to get back on their feet after this?
Well, in DC, as of, I believe, next week, restaurants are supposedly at 100% capacity.
Okay.
I think we've seen that the jurisdictions that have been less stringent, or in turn less careful about COVID, and have had their doors open, have done at least economically better than the places that were strict, right?
Sure.
So in my mind, as DC, the rules become looser and the government and consumers embrace the fact that it's okay to go to a restaurant, I think there's going to be pent up demand for good hospitality.
I agree.
I mean, aren't you like, you like hard up? Oh man, I desperately want to have a nice meal in in a place that I used to go to, and at least have some semblance of not as much worry being there.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I'm a guy that sat out in the middle of outside in the middle of the winter with overcoats and and blankets.
Yeah.
I mean, not only did I want to support my clients and my friends and restaurateurs, but I actually wanted to be out. I didn't want to be constrained so much.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
I think we're going to see a surge, and I'm hoping that will be the impetus for our industry to start to heal.
Nice. Read a little bit more about you, Jimmy. And like I said, I've known you for quite a few years here. I doing some research, I found out and read a little bit. You may have been a little bit of a troublemaker in Japan.
Oh no.
And you came over in high school and ended up in Missouri, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Tell me a little bit briefly. Tell me a little bit about the rebel Jimmy.
Sure. It's actually my parents are rebels,
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
right? They're immigrants. They wound up leaving China during a very tumultuous time, wound up immigrants in Japan, started their own gig. I mean, took risks like
Absolutely.
real risks,
Mhm.
and they were. I grew up in a household where rules were there to be broken in many ways. Like we as a family, we didn't fit in. We're Chinese immigrants to Japan. Japan is not friendly to immigrants, honestly.
Yeah.
So that was the norm for me. And my parents were entrepreneurs. My both my parents were families of entrepreneurs. So I don't know if there's such a thing as a genetic predisposition to being entrepreneurs, but I definitely grew up with one.
Yeah.
So by the time I was a teenager, before I got shipped off to Missouri, it was really because I had really pushed the envelope.
Yeah.
Selling tax-free cigarettes to bars at night and buying tax-free liquor and peddling it in restaurants. And, I had
Nice.
an illegal motorcycle and I would loan it to my friends and they would get arrested and I'd have to get them out of hock from the police station. But my parents figured out that I was in the middle of all of that. And I wasn't getting caught, but my friends were.
Sure.
And they were finding my inventory in my coat closet, My parents confiscated my liquor inventory one day.
Uh-oh.
I said, I had paid for it and that was my inventory to sell it. I said, where is it? He says, you're not supposed to have that. We're using it in the restaurant. So they absorbed my inventory. And by the time I was doing that, my parents got really, really worried. And I got shipped off to Missouri to live with my father's sister, who's a professor at the WashU.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they figured that I would get an education living with a educational family in the middle of nowhere, because St. Louis was middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it was. I live close to there, so I can understand that. And obviously it worked out well for you.
It really worked out well for me. I owe my career and my education to my aunt who educated me, and they were completely the reason I got enough of an education to wind up at Cornell.
Yeah, absolutely.
I probably would have never gone to college if I hadn't left.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, if things work out for reasons and you have light bulb moments, you've had a few of them, obviously. So it's a great thing. And me, for one, I'm certainly glad that you got shipped out of Japan to St. Louis, Missouri, to end up where you're at today, because it's certainly an honor to get to know you. That's the formal questions I've got for you. But
okay.
before I let you go, Jimmy, I do like to end on a little bit more humorous note. So I've got a speed round, and basically there's some funny, dumb questions, and just tell me the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
What's your favorite breakfast cereal?
I hate cereal.
You hate cereal. It's amazing to me. I can't tell you how many consultants do not eat cereal. It's been crazy for me.
Look, I'd rather have a bowl of rice, miso soup, and a piece of fish.
Understandable. And it's crazy to me. I might have to, listen, for FCSI, I may have to throw out that question, because literally nobody has said that they like cereal yet in all the interviews I've done with it.
Okay.
So it's crazy. Anyway, fancy restaurant or local dive?
Local dive almost all the time, but punctuated with fancy restaurants often enough that, yeah.
Well, you got to support your friends, like you said, right?
Absolutely.
What's a vice that you can't part with?
Food.
Puppies or kittens?
Puppies.
Do you sing in the shower?
No, do not.
What do you do when you get stuck in traffic to pass the time?
Something illegal, which is look at my phone.
Live on a moon base or live on a Mars base?
Mars base.
Okay. If you were given $1,000 to spend on your closest friend, what would you get them?
$1,000 for my closest friend would be the most fabulous bottle of champagne.
Oh, good answer.
Probably that would buy me a 6-liter, a big bottle.
Exactly. Would you consider yourself spontaneous or a planner?
I am spontaneous by fault.
Okay.
Because I can't plan.
If you were in charge of a company's vending machine, what would be the top 3 items you'd have in the vending machine?
I would be like a Japanese vending machine, which would have things like rice balls and pizza and real food coming out of it.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Night owl.
Soft tacos or crunchy tacos?
Soft.
What's your guilty pleasure snack?
My guilty snack would be chocolate.
Dark chocolate or milk chocolate? Or
Dark.
does it matter? Okay. Coke or Pepsi?
Neither.
Cookies or brownies?
Cookies.
Any particular kind?
Homemade.
Okay. Are you a day planner kind of guy or a digital planner kind of guy?
Digital.
Well, that's all I've got for you today, Jimmy. Tell people how they can find you, more about you, and get in touch with you.
Oh, I'm easiest to reach via my website at YuiDesign.com. There's a link that'll get you to me, and if for all of the FCSI members, I'm on the directory and fully reachable anytime for any of our colleagues.
Well, that wraps up this edition of On Tap, presented by FCSI the Americas. A huge thank you to Jimmy for joining us today. We can't do these shows without members like you. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, make sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, and make sure to turn on those notifications so you don't miss out on any future episodes. But until then, cheers.